think a lot of entrepreneurs realize that legals are really important, but they're often not urgent. Either they end up not looking after that part, or they self-lawyer. Yeah, look, I think if I had to pick the most important kind of thing to put in people's mind, it's to
Welcome to the Sandpit Startups podcast, where we journey into the minds of the brightest and the best the region has to offer. We're here to connect the entrepreneurs in the studio with the entrepreneurs sitting at home, and we sincerely hope that you are motivated, educated, or inspired by the content we'll provide today. And if you are, you know the follow button is.
We are joined today by Ahmed Arif, one of the co-founders of Clara Technologies. Clara Technologies is a legal tech startup based on a SaaS platform that digitizes most aspects on the legal side of things for entrepreneurs. May it be ESOP pools, may it be term sheets, or even company formation. So we are excited to have Arif talk about legal tech in this part of the region. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, guys. Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure's all ours.
As a startup co-founder, we usually have a lot on our plate, from product iterations to firefighting and operations, and also developing marketing strategies. But this tends to happen such that we neglect the legal aspect of things, which is complex in itself. How does Clara change the dynamics for the startup entrepreneurs?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's actually kind of the thesis of why we started Clara. On the one hand, I think a lot of entrepreneurs realize that legals are really important, but they're often not urgent in their mind. It's kind of that quadrant of important and not urgent. So it kind of gets put to the bottom of the pile as ops. You're trying to launch a business. You're trying to raise funds. There's a million things going on, and that means that either they end up not looking after that part, or they self-lawyer. Self-lawyering is a big issue. We often say that Clara, we're not really competing with lawyers or humans. Really, we're competing with Google often. Right? We're trying to provide something that's more relevant and higher quality. So we found that a lot. My background is as a lawyer, and one of the things I did was advise a lot of startups, and a lot of it was fixing the mistakes that happened in the early days, right? But we also appreciate that it's quite a bit of a black box. It can be expensive if you go to the wrong type of lawyer or do the wrong kind of thing. That can also be a bad experience. So bringing all that together, we thought, we need to provide something that is scalable, that's digitally native, that you can do to a large degree on a self-service basis, but that's accessible, designed with usability and user experience, and that's also relevant, best practice, and taking into account the correct jurisdictions, right? Those are all the missing elements. Those are all the kind of pitfalls. So we brought together our experience, myself and my co-founders, of what would we typically do when we're advising a startup to get started, right? Our slogan is startup, right? There's a number of things, and we mapped those out and said, what part of that can we apply those principles? What is digitizable? What's automatable? What is scalable? There's going to be parts that just aren't. That's fine.
Yes.
But what are the parts that are? And let's try and address this neglected but important segment, right? So that's what we do with Clara. As you said in the intro, it's a digital platform. It helps founders digitally form their companies. So that's kind of one area where you don't form in the right place, or you don't form at the right time, et cetera, et cetera. You don't form with the correct principles in place, right?
Yes.
You can generate some key startup contracts if you want to do fundraising. There's a few fundraising documents. If you want to manage governance with your co-founders, which is also another area of where issues can arise. If you want to hire your first team members, if you want to protect your IP, if you want to build an ESOP, manage it, you can do all of that on the platform. And then you can also manage your cap table, keep an eye on your dilution, do your scenario modeling, so that when you are issuing, these safes and convertibles, you know what's going on, what that looks like for you, and a data room. Share it with accelerator programs you're applying for, or I'll share it with potential investors who want to do due diligence, etc. So that's kind of long-winded way of answering why. Why it's important and how we are trying to address those things you touched on, which is people are busy, they don't know where to go, it's a bit scary, they might do it themselves or not do it at all. So that's kind of the idea behind the platform.
I would love to understand further about the challenges perhaps you might have faced when bringing something that's conventionally quite face-to-face into the digital world.
Yeah.
And I particularly like the term that you use, digitally native.
Yeah.
Yes.
I haven't heard that before, but it kind of strikes exactly what a digital platform should be.
You've actually touched upon what has probably been our biggest challenge. If you're delivering a digital service that people generally associate with a people service, right? Then there's always this tension of, are you an advisor? People want to speak to you, want to get your advice, which is not what this is about, right? It's supposed to be a tool alongside their advisors, alongside their, the people that they work with. So that was one tension. And another tension is we're actually, to a large extent, creating a market and trying to build a business in that market at the same time, which is significantly more difficult. If anybody out there is in the idea stage, if you can avoid creating your own market, that and then actually you use a market that already exists, it'll be a lot easier.
Yes.
Now the flip side is you have it to yourself if you manage to create it, or it's not completely to ourselves, but it's a not a crowded market, and the barrier to entry is much higher. So there's some nice kind of moats around you. But honestly, the chance of failure is significantly higher. So those were kind of interconnected challenges. We haven't fully solved them yet. We still have those tensions of people trying to use us as advisors. But I think what we do is we create a lot of content, a lot of education, a lot of help center articles, blog posts. And try, and we don't turn anybody away. We still speak with them, but we kind of try and encourage them to, ease them into the self-service concept, and read this, and then if you still have a question, come and speak with me. And then we also have a network of service providers, including lawyers, that work with us, for free or for discounted rates, depending on what it is we're doing, who also want to help the ecosystem, and this is kind of their area, so we can lean on them and refer to them as well, part of the our Clara partner network, to help people. Because, as I said, no matter what you do, the digitally native part, the tech is not quite there to cover 100%. It's probably covering 30 to 50% at the moment, and increasing, every year.
Yeah.
So, in order for us not to be seen as a partial solution, and not to leave somebody without anywhere to go, where Clara stops, there's always somebody to kind of take it that last mile through it. So that's how we dealt with that tension. And then the creating of the market bit, it was mostly about educating people that this is a tool that they need, right? So people understand that they need accounting software, right? It's just a market that's existed for a long time.
Yes.
But the idea of legal software, or legal operating system, as we sometimes like to call ourselves, is still new to people. They think of that, that's a lawyer, not a tool that I can also use in that space. So just a lot of educating our target segments, basically.
We're going to take a brief break to hear from our sponsor, Middle East Advisory Partners, top-tier advisors servicing the owner-managed, family-run, and SME sector. Here's Paul Donnelly to give you the tip of the episode.
Hire and train staff carefully. Employees are your greatest asset. Hire individuals not only for their skills, but also for their cultural fit. Invest in their ongoing training and development to keep their skills sharp and aligned with your business goals. Listen to your employees. Often they're closer to daily activity, and remember to keep employees engaged, thinking about succession planning too.
If you'd like an experienced advisor on your team, reach them at me-advisorypartners.com. So if it's maybe considered a tech-assisted solution. What do you need to do to bridge the gap between that and to become a full tech solution?
I mean, to become a full tech solution in the space that we're operating in would require the digitization of the vast majority of know-how that a lawyer advising in that space has. Right?
That's a tough ask.
That's a pretty big ask.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, not anytime soon.
Yeah.
Everything you see with AI, etc.
The chat GPT for lawyers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's fine, but ChatGPT is more just around. For me, it's just a more human-sounding delivery of information, right? It's not really doing. It's great, but that's what it is. But one of the things that we're actually super interested in and definitely researching internally in our kind of innovation division is how you use those kind of models, but to train them on startup data, lawyer databases, not on Google searches, right? So it's a big difference there. So that will help a lot. That will screen more queries. It will answer more questions, and the more data you add in. But there's always going to be, situations that require, some brain power.
Yeah.
But that's fine. I think our goal is not, as I said, to replace, but if it's to empower founders to understand how to ask the right questions, even of their lawyers, and to reduce and focus what they need to use advisors and lawyers for, it saves them money and just puts them in a better place overall. And frankly, speaking to lawyers who operate in the space, they love it too, because it's not that profitable for them to deal with every little issue and all the early stage stuff and clean up the messes. That's not what they're interested in. They kind of want to pick off the juicier bits of work out of successful startups. But they have to operate in the space, and you have to kind of start with them from the beginning if you want them to use you later. So this is a way to stay close to the space, interact with their customers. They send them to Clara, right? While not spending as much time, because we've done a lot of that work. So they can do it for free or for highly discounted rates, not make any money off it, but do it at a bigger scale because of the tool. They can work with 100 startups instead of 10.
Yes.
And then when there is kind of the juicier work that makes sense for them, at least they were there supporting in those early stage, and they can pick off that work.
So it's kind of like a delegation bot for these, not bot, I would say, but like for these lawyers.
Yeah, I would say delegation is a good word. Screening as well, just to kind of
like kind of like nurture them, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just educate them, tool them up, empower them. That's kind of what it's all about. Yeah.
As a founder, I always feel that I have a race against time. That if I could save time on things which is essential but could be done quite faster. For example, the jurisdiction of the company that I would like to form. Yeah. And I would have, through research, domestic options, which could be an ADGM or a DIFC, but there are also international options like a BVI or a Delaware. Yep. But how do I take the right decision? How would you advise startup entrepreneurs what they should be thinking about? And you mentioned company formation with Clara. How would that also be associated with it?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the most critical choices I think an entrepreneur is going to make at one point in their journey. There's a lot of I think misinformation out there on when to set up, where to set up. Oh, I heard about Delaware, and it looks like online it's $200 and it's super cheap, and why would I go somewhere else? But of course, there can be a lot of pitfalls, right?
The tax
consequences. Also, what legislation you're subject to when you run your business, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really, really important to properly think that through. What we do is, so we have, we do a lot of education around this, right? We've got some articles. The first challenge is actually not to get you to the point where you're thinking, should I go to ADGM or Delaware? The first challenge is actually to educate people that there is a set of jurisdictions that you have to have a company in if you want to raise funds, right? We call investable jurisdictions, right? If you and there's a separation between where you operate, particularly in the region. It's not true in all jurisdictions, but there's usually a distinction between where you operate, where you have your office space, where you have your employees, where you're going to sign your contracts and and make your money and spend your money, and where you are going to have your cap table where you're going to have the investors sit, where you have your vesting, your ESOP, founders, where you have your governance, the main board, all of that. And if you are the type of startup, which most are, that will be looking for venture funding at some point, or any sort of professional finance as opposed to like friends and family, then they will, those types of investors will not invest in your, in onshore, anywhere in the region, or in really any free zone outside of the common law ones that are deemed investable.
Okay.
Right. So there's a handful of jurisdictions out there. You said Delaware, Cayman, BVI. In the region, you've got ADGM and DIFC.
Yes.
Those are really the only two. You've got Singapore.
Okay.
Between the ones that I just mentioned is probably, it's got to be north of 90% of all venture dollars globally would flow out of those names, right?
Okay.
There's a few others. Europe's a bit different. There's a few others in Europe, because of various double taxation treaties, Netherlands, Luxembourg, but it's a small percentage. Between most of the things that flow through China is Cayman, for example, US and a big part of the world, the rest of the world, and LATAM, Delaware and Cayman.
Delaware,
So just those two actually is the vast majority, and ADGM and DIFC for the region. So I can't tell you how many times you speak to a founder, it's like, well, I've got my whatever. I don't want to pick on any zone, but some free zone or onshore, and I've signed a bunch of safes, and I want to do my round now. That's not going to work. You have to set up another company, transfer your shares there, transfer all the convertibles that you signed to that. It's a bit of a hassle. So that's step one, just understanding that there is this separation.
Yeah.
Typically a holding company in an investable jurisdiction, and then wherever you operate, more than one place, whatever is fine. And then where do I select? And it's not, there are a lot of factors that go. It's one of those things that I think we've maybe not 50%, but 80% of the way got there digitized, but there's still probably a bit of a conversation around your situation. Who are your investors? Are they some investors have just say no to a particular jurisdiction because of their internal rules or because of one of their investors, right? Because people forget investors are generally speaking investing also other people's money. So they've got their own investors with their own restrictions, right? Speak to them. If you're dealing with regional investors, ADGM is fantastic. If you're dealing purely with US investors who've never invested in the Middle East, right? They might be like, well, what's ADGM, right? Unfairly, but that will be their view. So you have to understand your investor universe. You have to understand your tax situation. You have to understand where your operations are going to be.
Yes.
But there's usually, I say 80% of the time, we can get to an answer through a questionnaire or through just a quick scoping call or a demo call or something like that. And there's 20% where we're like, okay, you've got a few issues. All we can do is raise them, but you have to go and get some further advice. But yeah, I would say even when in that 20%, 15 of those go back. So a 95% success rate in telling them this is the jurisdiction that you ultimately have to go with. And then one of the things we did is that whole process then from that point on is fully digital, right? So forming the company, paying for it, uploading your documents, filing, and then you get everything back with your first cap table and everything from day one, all kind of online, and the data is structured. It's not sitting in a PDF somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So, and visualized.
We're going to take a brief break to hear from our sponsor, Inheden.
Hey there, visionaries and dream chasers. Meet Inheden, your ultimate partner in turning your visions into digital realities. They are not just another ID company. They are your growth partners, a tech angel invested in your success. Looking to expand your business or create an unforgettable user experience? Inheden has your back. With optimized software development, cutting-edge design, and a blend of in-depth research and marketing, they are here to help you empower your ideas. Curious? Head over to inheden.io. That's INHEADEN.io. And the details to get started with your dream project today. Dream, empower, inspire. Inheden.
So it's clearly not black and white. There's a lot of considerations you have to go through. So I think to look back to what you were initially saying, there is no quick way to do it.
There is no quick way.
Particularly when
all
you need
takes
to
its own
speak.
sweet time.
Yeah. Obviously, your ESOPs take a lot of consideration as well, because I feel like with giving percentages to employees, there's probably a fine line between, it needs to be enough to actually attract good talent, but it also shouldn't be too much to sort of like degrade the value of the company or perhaps liquidate your shares too much.
Yeah.
What are maybe like the top considerations when it comes to ESOPs? And I think as well, just to add on to that, it would be great if we could get like a small definition of or a description of what an ESOP is for any viewers that may not know.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a very big topic. I mean, I give 90-minute workshops just on ESOP. I won't take 90
Let's
minutes.
get the juicy parts then.
Let's try and do it in 9. Okay.
Time is on.
Yeah, so I mean, ESOP, the definition thing is important. There's a lot of names and terms and words that are thrown out there. ESOP stands for Employee Share Option Plan, typically, or Stock Option Plan. Sometimes they're called SIPs, Share Incentive Plans, or Employee Share Incentive Plans, or there's different ways to dice it. But ultimately, it's not limited just to employees, which is why it's a bit of a misnomer, ESOP. But it's a program or a plan that you put in place with stock options, share options, right? So equity in your startup, that you then kind of grant to various team members that are interacting with you in certain ways. It doesn't have to be employee, as I said. It could be an advisor, it could be an employee, it could be a consultant, it could be whatever, right? A team member that you want to do. I would say 3 things typically for an ESOP. It's attract, align, and retain, right? You're trying to attract talent because as a startup, you're probably not paying market leading salaries.
Yes.
So and you're also competing against other startups who are also offering equity. So you have to offer something attractive to get the right talent in the first place. Align is to basically align them with you, to give them an owner mentality, right? So to kind of have them think this side of the table as opposed to just clocking in and out and being an employee, give them that kind of passion, give them that skin in the game. So the alignment of interests, because there's some things that might not necessarily be, good for their, when they're going to end their day, but it's going to be great for the value of the company, right? And then retain, because typically how ESOPs are structured or how they should be structured is that they are over time installments. It's called a vesting schedule, right? So if you want to give somebody some options, you wouldn't just say, here are the shares. You could just give them shares in that case. You want to say, here are some shares and here's how you're going to earn them. Like a standard vesting schedule might be over 4 years. There might be what we call a cliff, which is like the first year, nothing happens. That's like a probation, just in case they leave, because giving somebody equity in your business, it's a big thing. It's like a marriage, right? You're really bringing them in, right? So you got to make sure you're comfortable with them and that they fit culturally, professionally, all of it. And then after that kind of cliff period, over let's say the remaining 3 years in that example, they would get some shares every month, every quarter, up to you how you structure it. So that kind of increases the chances that they will stay with the business over that vesting period, obviously, because they want to earn the shares. So you feel more comfortable investing in them as well as a team member, right? So that's basically ESOPs in a very high nutshell, but the different ways to do them. There are phantom schemes, there's non-voting shares, there's all sorts of things that you have to consider. There's, how does the ESOP impact your dilution, your cap table, what you call your fully diluted capitalization? If you're raising through convertibles, there's different definitions, which means different parts of the ESOP might dilute you as a founder versus dilute everybody. It gets quite tricky, but yeah. So again, a tool. It's not just Clara. Of course, there are other tools, but Clara is designed to also do all the maths for you, right? So you can see the dilution. If you're adding a convertible, you can see how that's impacted. You can model that. If I do a round, etc., and you can do the grants, get the vesting reminders. It's really important to stay on top of that, right? When something's vesting, when you have to issue shares. And there's actually something you can do an ESOP. We have an ESOP calculator as well. So it's like, well, if I want to give somebody 3%, what does that mean? Because percentages are dangerous, right? It's fine to talk into percentages when you're just having an initial chat, so you understand conceptually how much you're getting. But the percentages will change because you're going to be changing your cap table. You're bringing on investors. There's dilution. So you never promise a fixed percentage. You have to convert it to shares when you actually get to the legal documents. And so there are tools out there as well to help you get from talking about percentages to talking about shares for your specific company.
Yeah.
So it's just something else to just keep an eye out on.
I think you brushed over something that could be like a really awful pitfall for some investors, which is like you said, it calculates it for you.
Yeah.
Or like it does the maths for you. I feel like if you have this plan in place, maybe you did self-lawyering, but you made one small mistake with that calculation. When you take that to investors, that's a massive hit to their trust in you, I suppose. So just having something to get the basics right is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's you can if you promise somebody percentage, that's a big problem, right? Or if you don't put the vesting in place in the right way, you can get freeloaders who get all the shares and just leave. If you or just have bad terms, because you need lever, there's good lever and bad lever, and we don't have to get into it. But if somebody does something wrong or leaves, or you have to fire them, do they get their shares? Do they not? There's so many things. So there's on the documentary side, which is why we've got the document on there. Although of course we always encourage you to speak with your lawyer as well. And on the kind of maths side, on your cap table side, just to see how that works. Anything to do with your equity, you have to be super, super careful with.
Yeah, seriously. Because at the end of the day, what do you have if not for your own equity?
Exactly. And I think even investors can be quite forgiving. So I don't think it might not be a negative. But on the other hand, if you do everything right, then they'll be super impressed. Right. So, and you want to try and stand out. And if somebody's doing due diligence on you, you've got your cap table in order, everything's clean, you're on top of it. When they ask you questions, you understand how it all works.
Yeah.
I think that's a big tick, getting you on their radar for investment.
Quite curious, because you said bad levers in terms of like equity. Is there a scenario where somebody leaves and they don't get their ESOP?
Yes, exactly. So that would be a bad lever. So, if you what constitutes a bad lever? It's completely up for negotiation, right? But let's use an easy example. If you have an employee who commits fraud, right? For example, right? Or just something illegal, there would be a bit of a ridiculous situation if you're then still giving them their 2%, and they're sitting there and they're getting proceeds on an exit when they're completely in the wrong,
while they're sat in jail, maybe
while they're sat in jail. And then there's a reputational thing as well. Some investors won't invest in you if you've got somebody like that on your cap table, right? They don't want to be sitting next to them, even if they're like a minor shareholder. So it's important to have some circumstances, however extreme or not. It's a moving line to say, if this happens, it's not just that your vesting stops. You take back everything that I issued to you for nothing, typically.
Wow.
You just lose everything. Sometimes it's just if you just leave no matter what, but usually in that case it's just that the vesting stops. So you get to keep everything to then, and then sometimes there's good lever scenarios where you say, listen, you did absolutely nothing wrong. You could have spent the whole 4 years, but something completely out of everybody's control, like a disability or whatever. So I'm going to give you your full thing anyway, right? That's like a nice thing from the company, which is good lever. And then the other thing to keep in mind is acceleration. So what happens if employees are there, they're happy to continue the 4 years, they did their part, but you sell the business 2 years in, right? Is it fair to say, well,
does it get triggered?
Do I get my 4 years? Do I get my 2 years? So you have to think about that. And the most common thing is what's called double trigger acceleration, which is to say, single trigger is if I sell, you get your full thing. But buyers might not like that because maybe they want to keep the business going, and then they're going to have to do more ESOP because you just accelerated all your existing ESOP to keep everybody, that retention bit, which will dilute, which means they're going to pay you less because they're going to take that into account. Yeah. So what you say is, I have to sell the business, and the new buyer or whatever the new situation is lets you go. So stops you from continuing your vesting. Then it's completely out of your control. You get your full whack. Other than that, you have to continue working your vesting schedule with the buyer. So those are the end. Either it ends normally, there's a good lever, there's a bad lever, or there's a liquidity event.
Awesome. Good summary. Yeah. Not the 90-minute
the workshop.
Yeah, that's pretty good actually.
Yeah.
The fundraising journey is something that I always love asking about, because it's complex in its ways, especially when you have many factors like the term sheets and you have various instruments, financial instruments like the safe notes, the convertibles.
Yeah.
It's not very easy to digest this if someone's hearing it for the first time. And with Clara, you do mention that you help with the fundraising process also to ease out the whole situation. How does Clara change things, and what are usually the pitfalls that startups, entrepreneurs fall for?
Yeah. So I do a 120-minute workshop on fundraising.
This is getting longer now.
It's a very big topic, even bigger than ESOPs. Fundraising is obviously a big one. I mean, I think the most important decision. So similarly, like with jurisdictions, it's figuring out that you need an investable jurisdiction, and then where. With fundraising, it's figuring out what type of fundraising first before anything else. That tends to be the most critical decision, and where people sometimes make mistakes. There's two main types of fundraising, just kind of very macro level.
Yeah.
You can do an equity round, an equity financing, or you can do convertibles. An equity round is, you have a valuation, you're selling shares, you're getting money.
Percentage. Yeah.
It's like, the real deal, the full thing. But that means you're actually bringing an investor on board. They're holding shares. They're going to have investor rights. They're going to have share rights, preferred shares usually, et cetera, et cetera. And then you've got convertibles, which is, a SAFE or a convertible note, which basically says, I'm not doing a round now, but can you please give me some money? And I promise to give you shares in return for that money somewhere down the line, if and when I do a round. And this is a gross oversimplification, but just conceptually, and as a compensation for you being a note holder instead of a shareholder, which is higher risk, less rights, and for time value of money, because you're giving me the money now, but you're getting your shares later.
Yes.
And for the extra risk that you take, because you're coming in now and not waiting for the equity round, I will give you certain things. Typically, it's a discount to the next round. So when I go and do the round, the people who waited for the round, out are 100, you're going to invest at 80. So I'm giving you a 20% discount, right? And then usually there can also be a valuation cap, which is a kind of a maximum valuation. So that's designed to say, well, listen, if things go bananas, crazy, everything's fantastic, and you kind of hockey stick shoot up, I'm still part of that. I enabled that as an early investor. So we should share beyond just a discount. If you 50x, I think I need to some more of that. So you'd say 20% discount up to a maximum valuation of X dollars. So if you raise at 10 times that valuation, the investor will still convert at that cap.
Yes.
So they'd have a 90% effective discount. That's not correct, but you know what I mean? It's not exactly correct, but so that's the convertible. And what we always say is, look, if you're early stage, if you're still trying to, establish the business, it's hard to value it, right? You need time to actually build enough of a business and have enough of a track record that somebody can professionally value it in a sensible way. That's not just finger in the air, right? And it's also a very expensive and time consuming to do an equity round. An equity round, I ask this question a lot, when I speak to startups, how long do you think it's going to take, right? And a lot of people think it's going to take a few weeks. The reality is it takes a few months.
Yes.
And that's from the point where you have somebody
who's interested,
like very interested, like after signing a term sheet, it's going to take several months. It could take you a year to get to that point, right? So, whereas convertibles, you can do them in 2 weeks. It's a very different scenario. And you also are not, burdening yourself with admin, investor rights, veto rights, a board that you have to convene. At that early stage, you just want to, you want the team, and a sophisticated investor understands this. I'm going early stage. I want the team focused on building the business.
Yeah.
I don't want them distracted with all this admin and stuff. And I want them spending every penny and every minute that they can
and growing the business
on getting this off the ground and not dealing with lawyers and investors. So as a sophisticated investor in early stage, I should prefer to just do the convertible, even though it's higher risk. Because frankly, at this stage, you're never getting your money back anyway, unless they graduate to the next phase. So why waste your time, negotiating all those things? So that's that. I would say a long way, but that's step one, is like just figuring out which universe are you in? Are you ready for the equity round? Are you doing convertibles? And make sure you get that right. So you don't kind of disadvantage yourself early on. And then it's, well, what kind of convertible? What are the terms? And this is kind of where Clara helps. You can't do an equity round on Clara yet.
Okay.
You can do convertibles.
All right.
So different terms you can choose. It's kind of a contract automation, so you can kind of choose different types, and you can also amend it offline or amend it with your lawyers or with their lawyers, and still put it on the system and sign it. So it gives you, good documents to work with, but also it automatically adds them to the cap table, which is important because then you can go into the cap table and do scenario modeling.
Yes.
Raising. So even though there's all these great benefits to raising via convertibles, one of the biggest disadvantages is
you don't know how much
quite
you get
know
diluted.
the dilution.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what your valuation in the round is to apply the discounts to the thing. So, raising on convertibles is like spending on a credit card. It's nice, easy, frictionless, but if you don't keep tabs on it, you get a very nasty surprise at the end when you actually have to take the money out of your current account and pay the bill, right? So the scenario modeling is, let me run the scenario and see what my dilution looks like and see what the bill looks like, basically, if I do a round on that. And I think one of the things we try and do is to remove the friction of, I have to do all the calcs. If you do it on the platform, the data is already there. So it's like no touch, no heavy data entry to kind of figure it out, go to your Excel. You just go click the button and see what it looks like 5 times a day if you like. Right? So.
Yeah. And is there a ceiling in terms of the amount you can raise through a convertible, or is it going to be always in $100,000-$200,000 threshold?
It's a very, very good question. So this is one of the reasons why you might find yourself in an equity round, because it sounds great. Like, why wouldn't you always just use a convertible, right?
Yes.
Well, one of the reasons is that there is a point in time where investors will not accept to invest through convertibles. And it depends on a number of factors. And one of the key factors is the amount you're raising, right? If you're trying to raise $10 million, you're not going to get that by way of convertible. It's just too much. The risk is too high.
Yes.
So people expect full set of protections and they expect you to do a full equity round. If you're doing $1 million, 3 even, maybe even 5 over a couple of years, you could.
Okay.
But it tends to be in the few $100,000 to $1 million or very low millions over a period of time. That's kind of your seed round by way of convertibles.
Yes.
Beyond that, you're going to have to be in the equity round. The other trigger is if the business is mature enough, you've got enough revenue, you've got enough customers, you've set yourself up, you've got enough of a team, then there's really no reason why not to. The investors say, why aren't you doing an equity round
instead?
Because we can value you now. And this is actually also one of, we kind of brushed over it, but one of the key differences, from an entrepreneur's perspective, from the founder's perspective, between the two is if you do an equity round too early, you're solidifying a very low valuation because naturally you're going to be, and you're taking all the dilution.
Yeah.
Whereas if you do a convertible, you're saying, give me a year, give me 2 years to expand my valuation. Yes, I'm going to give you a discount, maybe a cap, but still the valuation is going to be significantly higher. And so the dilution is going to be lower. So those are the triggers: amount, as you said, and the maturity of the business, and where if it's in a stage to be to have a fixed valuation.
Super.
So we're just entering the last stage of the podcast here as we close in on that time barrier that we unfortunately have.
Yeah.
Just as one last question towards you, would you leave the viewers with any short nugget of knowledge that you may have? If you want to condense everything you know into one tiny little.
Yeah, just give me the answer. Look, I think if I had to pick the most important kind of thing to put in people's mind, it's to understand, kind of what you don't know. I don't want to be too Rumsfeldian there, but the unknowns, that's the biggest risk, right? So there's things there that you don't know. So ask the right questions. Ask them early.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be. You don't have to speak to a lawyer. Speak to your fellow founders. Is the best resource to guide you. But don't let that ride and go off. And as you said in the beginning of the podcast, just go off, build the business, and forget about this other stuff that you're unsure about.
Yes.
Just pause. I know you got a million other things. It's not about the answers, it's about the questions. Just ask the right questions early on and get a clearer picture. And then if you still decide this is something I want to park, but it's an informed decision, that's fine. So that would be kind of, I guess, my one thing.
Awesome. Thank
Fantastic.
you.
Yeah.
Where could the viewers go to learn anything more if you spike their interest in any of these topics today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our website is our best resource. Just clara.co, CLARA.co. Great resources. We've got help center articles, blog posts, videos. You can sign up for free. Everything I've described, 80% of that you can use completely for free as well on the platform.
Wow.
There's just a few things that you might have to pay for, and there's there's a chat in there as well if you want to reach out to any of us.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks
Thank
for
you so
having me.
much.
Yeah, it was a great discussion. Thanks, guys.